You're listening to The Breakup Theory, conversations about ending things and collective liberation. Today's episode features a recording of the talk that Vicky Osterweil and I gave at the 2025 New York Anarchist Bookfair. The talk was called How Do We Live Now? And we discussed our CAW project and the way that anarchists can participate in the culture war. As Vicky reminds us in the talk, politics are downstream from culture. The seriousness of the left often leaves out the importance of culture, like making beautiful things that inspire and touch us or that make life worth living, in favor of militating for a revolution. Like everything else, we need to wait until after the rev to attend to these things, or perhaps there will be no artistic pursuits at all. But the history of anarchism shows that culture is often a starting point for anarchists, and it also provides a source of feeling that can create a whole world of pleasure and connection around us right now. If it wasn't important, the right wing and fascists would not have mounted decades of attack against these things we produce and that shape us. The so-called culture war that aims to destroy what they see as a source of radicalization. As we can often learn, there's usually truth in their attack against us, and rather than deny its importance, we can lean into the source of their fear as part of our refusal to reproduce the world, to turn the culture war into a social war. It's always a pleasure and inspiration for me to talk with Vicky, so I, for one, enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. At the head, I just want to note that the sound quality is not at the normal level. You can hear the room while we talk. This also means that my edits are a little rougher because there's no silence between our sentences. All this to say, there may be some difficulty in making out some phrases, but I still felt it was worth sharing. But apologies in advance for the lower quality. I also want to note that I included our responses to audience questions, but cut out the questions themselves. I still think there's a coherence that you can follow in our responses. I'll mark the transition to questions so that it doesn't seem to come from nowhere. Here's the description we wrote for the workshop. The right wing is correct. This is a culture war, and we cannot cede ground or meet them on their territory unless we're ready to give in. In this CAW Writer Collective workshop, Vicky Osterweil and Shuli Branson will lead a conversation about the role of anarchist culture in fighting the current political forces, using both the framework of culture war, or as we prefer to name it, social war. The question we pose, how do we live now, aims to turn our attention towards the beauty we make every day in refusal, relationship, dreaming, and making life both individually and together. We will provide anarchist analysis of the obstacles and possibilities we face for collective action, emphasizing the creation of a wide and robust anarchist culture to create possibilities together against society. Art and analysis go hand in hand, and an often overlooked part of the anarchist project is the replacement of this social world of capital, the state, and empire with a culture of autonomy and collectivity, our bread and our roses. We have to destroy this world in order to truly sense the other worlds we have right in our hands. Before we get into the conversation, I'll do my usual rundown of ways you can support this project. If you like the podcast, please rate it and follow it on the different apps where you listen to it. It does help boost the potential audience. But also tell your friends. I love hearing from people about their thoughts. And as always, any questions you might want us to tackle on the show, you can call us at 917-426-6548 or use the form form.jotform.com/thebreakuptheory/stories. Or you can find me on Instagram at The Breakup Theory and DM me there. If you want to access more of my work, as well as the work of Carla Joy Bergman, Danny Burleson, and Vicky Osterweil, you can sign up for our newsletter at cawshinythings.com. If you subscribe, you will also get access to all of our articles, our Discord server where we have discussion, movie nights, writing workshops, and book clubs, and more. Our podcasts, advice column, and zine and sticker library are always free. I'm proud of the thing that we are building together, creating a support system for the lonely and often impoverished work of writing, and also finding ways to engage with new people committed to collective thinking and writing. And if you want to reach any of us at CAW, you can email caw.shinythings@proton.me. Vicky also has a new book coming out with Haymarket Books called The Extended Universe: How Disney Killed the Movies and Took Over the World. This should be really great. I haven't read it yet, but I'm so excited for it to come out. If you pre-order it, it really helps Vicky, so I would go over to Haymarket Books or bookshop.org or wherever you buy books so that the publisher knows that there's interest in this book. The Breakup Theory is a member of the Channel Zero network of anarchist podcasts, which pulls together a wide variety of shows taking an anarchist perspective on culture, politics, actions, and more. Check it out at channelzeronetwork.com. Okay, now for our talk.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out today to hear us talk about how do we live in this moment. And one thing that we're going to be talking about a lot is about culture and the way that we interact with politics, between politics and culture, which we often divide as two different spheres. Both of us were brought into anarchy through punk rock class. It's a story as old as our generation. But I was just wondering if folks could raise their hand if you were brought into like political thinking, activism, however you want to define it, anarchy, through like a cultural object, like through music, through art. Cool.
So Vicky and I are part of a writer-worker collective called CAW, which is an acronym to mean whatever you want. And we put this together with Carla Joy Bergman and Danny Burleson because we realized that we're all writers doing our own thing, trying to survive, and then it's like, why not collectivize? Like, that's all we talk about all the time, is not doing things individually. We all have our own like Patreon or Substack or whatever it is. So we put something together, and this like big project, and we're hoping that we can share a bunch of our stuff. We have different subscription things where a lot of stuff is free, and then a lot of stuff we ask people to support us. The experience of trying to put out cultural work within an anarchist frame is like very difficult. If you're trying to write articles for leftist magazines, they don't want you to go into anarchism. They want you to do some analysis with no action at the end. Maybe if you're ready for Jacobin, you can talk about unionizing something, or I don't know. So I don't know, my experience is a lot of times I pitch articles and they're like, this is a little bit too much, can you back it off a little bit? So that is another reason why we wanted to create our own thing where we aren't going to be held back in the extremity of what we want to propose. One of the ways that I feel like I hit the wall with people is I don't want to destroy this world. And socialists don't want to destroy this world, They just want a better government. So yeah, the four of us found some kind of common ground, although we all do slightly different things. And we've embarked on this project earlier this year. But so pulling from this as a project that we're engaged in, we obviously believe that anarchists making cultural work is important. It's not simply supplemental to the work that goes on or the actions in the streets. There's a connection between them that is important. And this is sort of what we want to get into in our conversation. So I'm just setting it up that way. And then I'm going to turn it to Vicky to dig in a little bit.
Yeah, so I think one of the questions we really asked ourselves when we were starting was, why make culture when the world is burning? Obviously, I don't know if you guys know this year politically has been a little weird. Indeed, the last 10 years, indeed. Well, actually, the world's been burning since 1492. Now, we have been in the same situation in certain ways, and extremely different ones than others, obviously. One of the main ways that continuity between movements, that memory, that history has been passed down is through cultural objects, artifacts. I wrote a history book. I've written two of them, in fact, now. But the vast majority of the history of revolution that I encountered before I radicalized, and then as I was radicalizing, was through novels and movies, right? And I think that some of them actually give me a better analysis than people who have just read the history. Because when you imaginatively place yourself in the day-to-day, in the everyday life, that's what we're interested in on the level of struggle. Is everyday life, pleasure, desire, being present. You get this one life and we live it right now, and we build the right world as part of that living. And culture is often, not always, but often a better way to transmit the feelings of that and the experience of that on the ground level than report backs, history, certainly theory. And so we think it's really, really important always to be doing this. And also because if tomorrow capitalism were to implode magically and, white people were to stop existing entirely, and I would still be wanting to read fiction and watch movies and make music, right? That's what I would do. I'd be wow, more time to enjoy the stuff I would like to enjoy. So yeah, so we collectivized it, and we have tried to make it work for us in a way that doesn't just burn us out on our phones. And another thing about, before we get fully into it, is if you're a writer or a creative worker, especially in New York, y'all know the struggle. We all compete with one another, right? We're all constantly fighting over scraps. None of us are surviving, and all of us are a little resentful of slightly more successful people. We try not to be, but it happens. It's just part of it because it's so hard. Thinking that as a practice culturally, we're so good at talking about that in terms of mutual aid, in terms of survival programs, in terms of lots of other things. But when it comes to creativity, we still subscribe to this really like fucked up individualist myth about like how, you know, you're a creator and like you just have to do it alone and like be discovered for the beauty of your work or whatever. Even if we can critique it, we often still act as though it ought to. All of that is to say that like what we are facing right now, a lot of times, what the last 5 years we have gone through, that was before Trump's re-election, attacks on trans people in particular, people with uteruses in general, but also just all of the far-right power building that has been going on since 2016, but especially since 2020, is often dismissed as culture war. Culture war, which means it's not the real issue, which is like, you know, your bank account or whatever, right? Which is the real issue. And obviously there's a lot of different problems with that, but there is a smidgen of truth that we need to be able to also, I am assuming everyone is not into the idea that being a trans person as well is a culture war issue, so I'm just going to move on. That is a life issue. But the theory that is operative in the Trump administration in particular, and in fascism as a tendency more broadly, is that politics and society is downstream of culture. That if you like win over the culture, you then will take over the politics over time, right? And this has been an effective strategy in the current situation because, of course, it does completely invisibilize the massive amounts of power and money that they have behind that cultural effort, the massive amounts of time that they have to practice their really shitty cultural arguments, like the lack of consequences they face, whatever, we know the situation. But I think like what ends up happening a lot of times, especially on the left, whatever you want to call it, in movement spaces, is this attempt to like redirect away from cultural issues. And there is a real meaningful reason to not fight on their terrain. I'm not saying we should just like, I hate when people are like, you know, we've got to like argue about immigration the same way they do. Like obviously that's a fascist argument. So we're living through this like moment right now where we have this really interesting opportunity because Trumpism in particular, as a form of fascism, is like a particularly spectacle and image-obsessed fascism. Trump has come to power twice through media strategies, right? His campaigning, like there was almost no on-the-ground campaigning. In 2016, he was clearly just trying to like run money through his collapsing empire by like having a campaign, and then he just won because like both the Republicans and the Democrats there couldn't be a weaker series of people on earth. And their movement hasn't actually faced real challenges in the street in some ways. The one time they did in 2020, we like kicked their ass. And then in the election of 2020, that was the only election since these records were kept where more people voted for the winning candidate than eligible voters who didn't vote at all. So normally the most popular candidate among eligible voters is no one, right? Every election, presidential election, except for 2020, and Biden won by a majority. It was the first time. It was not because we like Biden, but it was like a clear, like that was, I think, the first and seeing how things are going, only popular. It's not democratic, you know, still children can't vote, incarcerated people can't vote, or undocumented people can't vote. We will never have a democratic election here, if such a thing is even possible. That's another topic. But like, it was the first and only popular presidential campaign we ever saw. And people were like, fuck Trumpism, right? And the Democrats were like, yeah, but like, Trumpism actually is gonna put you guys in jail. Like, we don't like 2020 at all. They continued the counter-revolution really, really intensely, right, using COVID and then Gaza to like just to create like a totally fascist structure of society under Biden that then handed itself over to Trump. I was really fucking scared before Trump came into office because I was like, oh, okay, like this is a populist really primed to like break solidarity with each other. Like there's the Red Scare ongoing about anti-Semitism, right? Like there's all this shit going on. But because Trump's administration only functions on spectacle, they have completely lost the plot. He has lost his juice. He's not funny anymore. He has no charisma. But they also have they have too successfully built a world in which everyone agrees with them. And that has been really powerful for them taking federal power, right? Like taking over society. It has worked. They won 2 elections on that basis. But they've disorganized the FBI, right? Like they are taking apart their own repressive apparatus. Like they are not doing a good job being totalitarians. Like they're trying to turn the righteous murder of the coward Charlie Kirk into like a cause célèbre. They couldn't even hold together for 2 days before they just gave up. They're like, oh, whatever, he's killed by right, I don't care. Fuck that guy, right? And the reason they're doing that is because they're at their breaking point. They're going to declare martial law. It's like, they've got the National Guard in our cities already. They're sending, what do you think martial law is? Like, it's like fucking the guy from the office saying, I declare bankruptcy. Like, no, it's sending the troops in the street. They're trying to do it, and they're getting their asses kicked, right? They're taking troops out of LA to put them in Chicago. And LA, like, organized in LA, like, they just fucked up, shit's really hard. And a lot of them are like, we fucking won. We've, like, slowed them down. And ICE numbers in Southern California were worse than they were in the rest of the country after that invasion started, right? So it's like they are counterproductive to their own goals. Okay, all of which is to say, they are living in a cultural bubble, but they have fully captured the media. They have fully captured the immaterial side, like way that society is organized. And if we continue to engage with culture through the like newspapers, the journals, the shit that we're used to, it feels like they're winning because they have conquered those domains entirely. They're completely captured, right? New York Times is like, oh, Charlie Kirk, what a fucking tragedy, you know? That man really was ugly and stupid, you know? What a beautiful soul. They've got nothing except the spectacle because they're also doing this simultaneous, weird, libertarian, anti-state thing where they're taking apart the very bureaucracy that would make them powerful enough to kill us. And in the meantime, ruining the economy so they're losing their base, right? Their base is demobilized right now. Like, if you remember, if you're, you know, old like me, you remember at this point in 2016, the alt-right was starting to peak. We were having to fight those fuckers every weekend in the street, right? And like, if this is like the successful, like, where are they? Like, yeah, some of them have been hired by ICE, which is scary as fuck. Like, it's bad. This is really good. But they're actually at the limits of their power. And we need to be able to propose and see a cultural vision that like recognizes, not just imagines something different, but is able to recognize the holes in their culture wall, in their total cultural control. And in order to do that, like, we can't just offer critique. Because like that language of debate and, you know, debate me is obviously like, you know, we can see that like some things work better than debates. So we think it's this really important moment to like build cultures, both as art, as creativity, as like flourishing, but also cultures socially, like where I'm in Philadelphia, like one of the main pieces of movement infrastructure that we've had over the last 4 years is a signal chat that people made to share illegal raves. And like 10 different mutual aid single chats have jumped off on that on specific issues. And like everyone stays connected. It produced the whole community. It was just like, it's called party share, right? Like that's the whole thing. It's full of really funny and hilarious, stupid arguments, whatever. But like these things snowball into one another because the division of culture and politics and economy and life and daily life and our home, these are all false divisions. These are spectacular divisions that they use to sell us that alienation back to us.
Yeah, I'm going to build off that, but also maybe take it into some different places. Earlier, Vicky was talking about how a lot of the kind of inspiration that she's gotten for thinking about a better world and anarchism comes from fiction, right, from science fiction. And if we think about the kind of cultural sphere that Vicky was talking about, the right wing forming, the thing that they do is speak whatever world they want into existence, right? Like the Fox News and Trump and all they know that if you repeat it, you make it true, right? Which on the liberal Democrat side, they still are trying to use like rational discourse in the marketplace of ideas, right? Some classical liberalism, enlightenment understanding about how the world works. I take this idea of like, we could speak the world we want into existence too, through our own cultural products. So like when Vicky's talking about their cultural sphere that is kind of totalized and they can replace the world, I'm arguing, and this is stuff I'm working on now, is that the more that we engage with that, we kind of can't see what we're actually doing and what's actually important. So like politics itself, I would argue, is a total distraction. We know that in terms of like voting, it takes up your time when you don't need to be doing it. But just the idea of politics itself, like the thing that like makes us seem like this is the most important thing. This is how you like are a serious adult, right? To like be involved in politics, to know politics, to like know the news. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't know any of these things, but to value ourselves and to put that weight on that takes us away from the actual on the ground living that we're doing. And you know, the Charlie Kirk thing, I think there's an interesting example there because he is one of those people that was engaged in the culture war. Right, who did sort of speak into existence the violence that he wanted to talk about, right? Like literally, he was talking about violence when he got popped, right? And that's where like their culture war meets material reality. And so like the rave loop, for example, that doesn't seem like if you were talking in a kind of organizing meeting and you're like, you need a grade loop, people would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's not important. But actually, like, doing that is life-making, right? It's like what people want to do. We want to enjoy life, right? We want to have pleasure. This is like, if we take any lesson from like gay liberation, it's to emphasize desire. And this is also why like Trump works, because he gets people's desire attached to him. The official, of their party there's no id to it. It's just like totally empty and boring. So I think that politics takes our perspective away from ourselves and away from what life actually means. And it makes us think that we don't know how to make life. Like, if I want to put this historically, like the long history of imposing capitalism on the world was taking people away from the immediate ability to reproduce their life through making them work and then having to buy everything. And so to the extent like we see ourselves separated from that existence, we feel like we can't do the things that are necessary for living, right? But we actually do things that make us able to live. Like, for example, we can talk about like, as they make abortion more and more impossible to get, people still get abortions, right? Like same thing with trans healthcare. Like, people make sure that these things happen. This is real and it's not politics. The other thing I want to say is that the sort of culture that we're given is a culture that narrows us into the structures that politics creates for us. So like, if you're watching Netflix, right, or TV, whatever, TV or movies, they're all either like superhero movies, which Vicky probably has a lot to say about that, cop shows, right, and like soldiers or CIA, FBI people. And I think that like, that's like, we are completely inundated with that, and it gives us this kind of individualist idea too of like we're the heroes of our own lives. And I think that is another way that like the culture that we are given distracts us from the things that we actually want and need. There's no difference between news and a Netflix TV show, basically, in my mind. They do the same thing to us. They operate on us in the same way.
Except that these days the news is more entertaining, usually, than Netflix slop, which is designed around us literally not paying attention, right? Like they ever take serious stuff. Anyway, yes, I have a book coming out in April. If there's still an economy in April, The Extended Universe, How Disney Destroyed the Movies and Took Over the World. If you want to read more about why all superhero movies are the same and why corporations don't want you to have the coronavirus vaccine. So I think one of the things to connect these two threads in a way that we magically are actually on point with what we were talking about is that all dictatorships, fascist or fascist adjacent, function on the leader or the leaders, if there are sometimes, being able to speak reality into existence. And they always eventually fail when that power degrades for one reason or another. The person's health fails, they get more and more disconnected, material crisis overcomes their ability to force things through. I think a really important thing about the first Trump administration, like weirdly, one of the most important facts to know about it was that there's this chart of small business confidence that was like released by Bloomberg. And this is like, they ask small business owners, right, fucking car dealerships, people who own stores or whatever, how good do you feel about the economy? And from 2016 to 2020, that chart goes up like 500%. It's the highest it's been since they recorded this fucking statistic by like a huge margin. Now, this is like the classic Marxist definition of like what a fascist does, right? Which is like make the petty bourgeoisie like feel good about themselves, right? They see themselves in the dictator, and sometimes that shit is right, and like it's right there in the numbers. But like they talk to people who are always like, "Oh, you're complaining about Biden's Bide-cession thing? Like there isn't a real recession." No, it was that there was Bide-inflation under Trump, right? Everyone thought the economy was better than it was. And so part of why he had that huge upswell of backing that eventually, was QAnon and January 6th, was the feeling that the economy was better. But now that he's on his family annihilation tour of America and he's trying to rip everything down, Daddy's back and he's fucking angry, like Tucker Carlson said, or whatever the fuck. Genuinely, like just impressed. Every now and then they fucking nail it. Daddy is back. That is what you think, and that's how this politics works. But yeah, so I think like it's not working now. Because the tariffs and the de minimis stuff and like all of these really, really fringe far-right economic theories are just immediately disastrous for the very small business owners who made the spectacle effective. And the way the spectacle sort of functions, as I understand it very quickly, the way Trump has hacked the media and the spectacle to come to power twice and never face consequences is because he just punctures it, right? He just says whatever the fuck he wants, and he punctures right through the spectacle, And then everyone around him, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter, capitalist, journalist, they're so invested in keeping the spectacle together, they repair it behind him, right? So there's all these people repairing it, like he says like some outrageous fascist stuff, and everyone explains it. He was just saying what normal presidents say, right? The headlines describe it as though what he said was like a calm, rational thing, right? So like people are doing this constant repair, and that gives his fans, and some of his enemies, frankly, a huge libidinal pleasure, right? Because we see him lie, say something absolutely batshit, and we watch all these serious, respectable people fall on the ground to cover it up. I think the Kurt was a really good example. We just saw that again, but it gets diminishing returns. Because eventually you're like, that's embarrassing as hell. Like, you're like, that guy? You're going to that for that guy? Like, for real? Like, it's embarrassing. And as you do it more and more, what Trump has done is he has purged his own party and the whole political apparatus and the federal bureaucracy. He's gotten rid of all the people who come up behind him to fix the spectacle. Those people aren't there anymore. So now he punctures it, and it just stays punctured. And everyone can see through it. And it feels like a crisis. And I think that's why a lot of us are feeling the sense of it feels so crazy that we're going to work every day and still living normal life, when it's so obvious every day, every second of every day, that none of these lies are working and that we can all see through it, really clearly. In a way that for I don't know, I imagine some of y'all in the audience has been deep gaslighting for me. I've been yeah, finally, everyone else can see this shit. So we get these diminishing returns, right, where the damage that they do to the spectacle, and so the spectacle gets more and more threadbare, the regime gets more and more weak, and the dictator, as he becomes acclimated, if you want, to willing his creativity into existence, can no longer tolerate any friction. But as it stops working, there's more and more and more friction. And as he surrounded himself with yes men and all these people who just repeat what he says, they cloister him more and more and more. So and this isn't just Trump. I mean, we're seeing it with Trump, but this is what the end of most dictatorial regimes look like. They get more and more internal, or even imperial regimes. They get in a court, like a monarchical or imperial court, where they get no information from outside of it, and they believe and operate entirely on the basis of what's going on in that space. And then material reality falls around them. There's the barbarians are at the walls, whatever metaphor you want to use. So it's an accelerating problem that they produce for themselves, and this administration and America are in a death spiral. And Trump didn't start it. This was already the case with the Beltway. Democrats did this. People were always why do Democrats just keep doing things that everyone hates? It's because they were just speaking to themselves. Everyone was in this court. But Trump has just turned that up to fucking 11 is 12, 15, whatever the fuck. So as that collapses, we can start to see the stars behind the fucking blanket, right behind the spectacle. We're seeing the stars now. And we have to describe it to each other, and we have to start trying to capture them and building bridges to them, because some forces will emerge to repair that spectacle, if allowed. Because there are real material interests to defend it. There's the economy, there's society as it exists, there's nationalism. Probably the American Republic is over, but something worse could obviously come up. It's not, we know enough history to know things get worse, right? We've read through enough history to know that. So there's this moment now we have to capture culture that can actually speak into existence a way that reflects that reality, that is more visible to people than it normally is. There are openings in this moment. This is an extremely dangerous and tenuous moment, and it is also a very open moment in which we have a lot of space to move, to imagine, to dream, and to build. And if we don't take the opportunity to do those things, someone else will, and that someone else could be, just an authoritarian left movement. It could be anything, who knows what it is. It's urgent in the same way that it is also, since 1492, we need to do it.
Yeah, so fascists typically want to replace the world as it is with this representational world that's totalized, right? That's why it's called totalitarianism. And at some point they hit the wall, right? Whether it's trying to invade Russia or whatever, right? There's some material obstinacy that they can't get through. But then when we have history, we tell these stories about it. And the way we tell the stories, I think, determines our future actions, right? We could also, if we wanted to get into, we could think about how the propaganda on Israel, right, as this kind of solution to the Holocaust. Now, we can learn from decolonial feminist thinking or something, right, that if we describe the power systems of the world, right, and think about that they're being reproduced in this way that we seem to think of ourselves simply as effects of power, we erase the fact that we are always implicated in making that world, right? And that within those moments, we can think about how to reproduce the world differently. even though we're kind of programmed to continue to reproduce the world as it is. Like, this is like the power of knowledge production. Like, even scientific experiments and research, they plant the thing that they're looking for, right? The question is already assuming the answer that they want, right? We see this with gender, to try to essentialize, like, masculinity is like, when we were cavemen or whatever. They make up a whole story. Now, on the left, they do this too. York Anarchist Bookfair, who's the French gay liberationist that I translated, like, he said something about, like, we're always like fighting the last war, right? The last revolution. And there's that Marx thing, right? That, like, first history is tragedy and then it repeats itself as farce. I think a lot of, like, leftists, the authoritarian leftists, they're programmatic. They want to look back to the way things are done and then, like, tell us how to do it now. And clearly that doesn't work. And also the things that were done aren't things that we want to do. And that pulls in a lot of people who do want the world to change, because they're given away. They're told how to do it. Yeah, so even leftists do this when they do it wrong. Right? It's sort of what I'm trying to say. And we as, like, anarchists, I'm assuming that some of you think of yourselves as anarchists. A lot of the times that when we run into trouble, like, on the streets, is because those people can speak so loud and get so many people to agree. But the material fact is that anarchists do all the work that allows them to, like, speak that way. And I think historically this has been true. Like, the groundwork of, like, all kind of liberatory leftist movements has fed off of the energy of anarchism. And maybe we could, like, refuse to allow that to be taken up in that way, and then have the story be told in a specific way. So making culture and playing with the forms of representation is, like, a way that we can try to make the world different right now. Punk is a really good example too, right? Prime Thing has a zine about this and gives a talk, but, like, punk itself is like a kind of anarchistic world. It's culture that's do it yourself, right? A whole kind of organized structure that exists in multiple cities and multiple towns, and that there's, like, networks, right? I think trans people also exist in this world like this. We actually know what we're doing, and we're doing the thing that we want the world to be like already. We just, like, get distracted by the idea of revolution, for example. That we too could replace the world in total with something else that's better. And that, I think, is another distraction.
Yeah, exactly. The question of the talk is, like, how do we live now? It was kind of a trap. The answer in classic anarchist fashion is the way we have been living, but more so. But I think, like, another example of this of politics and revolution is that, like, organizing is, like, so mystified. It's so exhausting. People are like, I'm an organizer, I'm an activist. It's like, you like have people meet in a room. Like, yeah, everyone does that. Like, people have birthday parties. People have each other over for dinner. People organize shows, right? And, like, an experience I've had in a mutual aid crew that I'm in right now was, like, I was able to, like, organize across, like, the country, like, really, like, kind of, not the whole country, obviously, but I was able to, like, find us places to stay and people to meet and talk to across the country, because I was used to doing that from touring in punk bands in my 20s, right? So I was just like, yeah, of course, if I have a contact in fucking Cleveland, I text them and I go, like, yo, are you into this, Like, that's just how you do it. You just, like, reach out to people, you talk to them. But, like, the other people in the crew who were young, like, some of the people in the crew who were younger didn't have that experience. Like, wait, how the fuck do you do that? And I was like, I literally send text messages. Like, you guys do it too here. Like, it just gets mystified as this magical thing that you're actually doing politics. Oh, you're doing organizing. And of course, organizers want that because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like they're special. They're resisting the world. They're fighting the world. They're building the better thing. We all fall into it. I also have this. Any critique I offer of this, like, is internal to myself as well. I have this feeling very often, like, I'm special, I'm really doing it, I'm in the fight, That's different from everyone else. And I have to remind myself, I'm like, bitch, shut up. It's actually really fucking easy if we take down the walls that imagine that the things are special and that they're in little categories of, like, culture and politics and art. Like, if we can see that there are, like, containers that hold those things that, like, are doable through many different methods, that all of us are creative enough to do because it comes naturally to us, because we achieve nothing alone in this world. When people say we're born alone and we die alone, that's bullshit. Who has ever been born alone? At minimum, your fucking testator is there, right? Like, there's a bunch of other people there too, right? And it's very sad when someone dies alone, and it's very rare. The idea that, like, our internal experience of, like, consciousness is, like, the only thing. Oh, now I'm really on. Okay, fuck it, we're not going down that path. We're not going to talk about Cartesian dualism. I'm going to talk about culture and how it's good and we like it. I think one of the things that also often happens when we critique this stuff, though, is that we go, yeah, there's no borders. It's all the same. It's all the same. Culture and art and politics is all the same. And it's like, it is worth maintaining the distinctions intellectually and discursively, because sometimes it's really important. to be able to point to something and say, that is this thing, and that is this thing. That can be helpful. That's language, right? Like the idea that we could just overcome that and we would all just sort of like vibe at each other and grunt or whatever, right? It's like, where does politics end up? And I think those end up in a pretty fascist politics too, where it's like, we don't talk about race or class, we just like together, we melt together in the fire of the riot or whatever. It's like, I mean, like, yeah, we feel that, but then like 2 hours later, we're like having fights again, you know, like it's not. So I think like being, what culture allows us to do, and I think transition also teaches us how to do this, but what culture teaches us how to do is how to hold the messy contradictions together without pretending that one is the correct answer and one is false, right? Without falling into this trap of like, this is the thing. Like, unfortunately, this is the thing. It's so specific. But like, unfortunately, like, we are messy, we are made up of one another, we make each other constantly, we are remaking each other constantly. Like, life is just the stuff that we do. Organizing is just doing stuff with your friends. We're just here, that's it. Like, we get this one chance, we should enjoy it. I'm going to another party tonight because I'm an idiot. Like, this is important to me. We have to like live in the ways that we understand, and we can't alienate ourselves from the way we are living in order to serve the revolution, in order to like get to that better horizon. You know, like, I will be happy after the revolution. Bro, like, you are so lost, it's so sad. And like, you know, we've accepted that like, we don't say, we'll do feminism after the revolution, we'll do anti-racism after the revolution. We like accept that's nonsense. But I think one of the final hurdles is a lot of people say, I will be happy after the revolution. Certain organizations have made it less appealing, but my politics is really based on, we want bread and roses too. We need desire. And like, you know, Emma Goldman, like, people talk about the Emma Goldman quote, if I can't dance, it's not my revolution. And you know, yeah, that's like a clever witticism, and she said it when someone was telling her not to dance. Also, she had spent 5 years organizing those mills in Lawrence where they came up with that slogan. That is a hard-won slogan out of like some of the most desperate struggle of women and children in like some of the worst labor conditions ever. It's not just her being like quirky and liking to dance. Like, that is like a core lesson of the ways that like feminists, family abolitionists, labor, and anti-police struggle come together, is dancing.
The way that we tell history often erases the most interesting parts about it. So like when those labor struggles were happening, there's also like a kind of culture made around it that made people happy and brought people together, right? It wasn't simply organizing. They like fed each other and had dances and had music and all these things at the same time. And we don't really often do that. We separate these things.
Like, if you read about the like 30s Communist Party, which is like the fucking Stalinist, right? It's like the most repressive, but if you hear people describe what it's like to live, they're like, it was a world. We had dinner together every night. Like we were all together, and like they talk about it, like it sounds utopian, but they were like fighting for Stalin's Communist Party. But like for them, like right their moment in America, like that's in the Depression, and they're like, they've built a beautiful life for themselves, despite this thing called politics, even its most hierarchical.
So I like to use the example of the encampments as a way to think about this. And I think that for me, like being involved in an encampment, I analyzed like what I thought was like not working or the way that it actually was working. I'm going to be very concrete, right? So a lot of the encampments formed out of the demand for divestment, that the institution would divest from Israel in some way, right? That gives you a reason to be there. It gives you a structure that orients you. But what was actually happening on the ground was people making life together, right? And like the students I teach and the students I had who were like in the encampment, they're like, whoa, we're like doing the anarchism that we read about, right? Like, and they're having fun and they're like teaching each other. Some of the encampments were way more authoritarian and some of them were like free like this, right? And I think that a lot of them went wrong when they put all in for divestment, right? When they actually considered this object that was just like a placeholder to make the world that they were making at that time the goal. And when they did that, right, this is like politics, the administration was able to divide the people up, give leaders who would be in a room for negotiation, or make people willing to stop the encampment when they got into the room to talk about things, right? And so what I want to learn from that too is that sometimes the thing that we say we're doing isn't the thing that actually matters, right? The thing that's happening on the side is the thing that gives us life. The political reason that we get to even be comprehensible to the world that we're trying to destroy, we shouldn't invest so much energy in that. And I think we can probably use that structure that I'm talking about in many different places.
It's 2010, you're in blue stockings. Two anarchists are talking about a university occupation and how you shouldn't have demands. It's 2025, you're in blue stockings. Two anarchists are on stage talking about direct. Sometimes political work is just saying the same thing over and over again and being patient with that.
That's speaking the world into
Here is where we move to the questions.
One of the biggest arguments I ever got on the internet was when I said the people who are into Excel as organizing are corny. And people were like so mad about that. Like, no, Excel's so valuable.
Oscar Wilde has this essay called The Soul of Man Under Socialism, which is actually like a kind of anarchist description. And one of the things he says about art is that if we were able to take away the hierarchies and capitalism and work and all these things, we wouldn't have art in the way that we understand it today, which is this mystified thing, like capital A art and geniuses do it, right? But rather we would have everyone would be an artist and life would be a work of art. And I think that's a really good way to think about it. And that is subcultures, using punk as an example, there's some potential of that within something like punk, right? Like anyone could pick up an instrument and do the thing. But obviously also punk can reproduce the same power structures and hierarchies that we want to destroy. So at this, I'm like, I love punk and also punk fucking sucks, right? At the same time.
Also, just a quick fact about the Nazis, because I just wrote about this in the book. People think of Nazi culture the way that Nazi propaganda has put it down in history. We understand Nazis through their own propaganda. We think their movies look like Triumph of the Will, or maybe like the really, really virulent anti-Semitic stuff, right? Their movies, there are the two movies by, thank you, I'm going to disrespect her every moment I can. And there's two really intense anti-Semitic movies. And there are hundreds of movies that Goebbels made that are frothy comedies and musicals and adventure stories. Because he was the right operated on a principle of just good vibes. And yeah, everyone in the movies are white and they're traditional Germans, but actually it's very rare. And it was only later, as the regime started to collapse, that the more naked propaganda started to happen. We think of Nazi propaganda as horrifying stuff that you see in the history books, but actually it was mostly just mid-entertainment. Something to think about. For that one, I think we do it by going underneath it. We're cockroaches underneath the foundation. We participate in the culture war by making free hormones and giving each other medicine and building mutual aid networks for each other that are invisible to the culture, but that make their arguments irrelevant. They can't take away our hormones if we give them to each other. As for cultural criticism, I wish I had the solution. After I wrote this fucking book, I couldn't watch movies for pleasure for a year and a half. It's fucking hard, I get it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. In terms of the reproducing trans existence, I think we often get caught up with that idea that we need to fight in the courts, right? Because the laws are the things that are making transition impossible. Participating in the culture war that way is a war of attrition, right? Defending smaller and smaller ground. And it takes our energy away from the other things that are going on that make transition possible that have been going on for decades, right? If not longer. So yeah, I just want to add that. Yeah, the criticism, I don't know, I went to grad school and I teach in universities, and I mean, for me, there's something that can be useful about that stuff, right? But the ultimate thing is to disidentify from the power structures that it imposes on the world, right? Because I think it's confusing. The people who go through that often think so highly of themselves, again, this kind of hierarchy, and then identify with the institution that's given them this power, and then completely lose anything. So, the Fred Moten, Stephen Harding thing is the only ethical relationship to the university is one of theft. Look, it's bad citational practice. Take what the fuck you want from something and then leave the rest of it. You don't have to be a good Foucauldian or something like that, right? Be a bad reader of someone. When we started this project, Vicky talked about how back in the day, within the Yiddish anarchist world, every block had their own newspaper, right? There was a proliferation of this kind of work that would be sort of local, but also connected to a wider world, which I think is this is underneath the project that we want to do. Yeah, there was whole worlds. People made whole worlds, right, for little parts of where they were that we don't think about that as much and don't do that or we do it and we don't realize that that's what we're doing and we call it something else a lot of the time. In terms of that, right, I think that all the things that work within what gets called leftism are anarchist, and then when they get recognized, they become something else. And obviously, we saw abolish the police became defund the police. There are people who started talking about that. There's an anarchist press, for example, that started publishing the kind of liberal versions of that. I don't know, I'm not going to say anything explicitly. But even the people who were in the streets and believe that stuff could get watered down by the things that are being produced, right? And all of this energy goes into to being like, oh, these people have a wider reach, so we need to give them more space because they're the ones who are being listened to.
Yeah, and I think that there can be a risk we get too obsessed with co-optation, and then we end up becoming contrarian. And I think that's a lot of the way that we end up getting right-wing. Like, people slide right a lot when they're like, oh, liberals like this, well, it must be bullshit, like the content is... It's like, no, it's bullshit because they got paid to water it down. Like, it's not, like, the first idea wasn't bullshit, right? I think it's worth remembering that criticizing woke, calling queers purple hairs, all that stuff came from the dirtbag left. Right? The left made jokes about it, and then the right was like, oh, this will build fascism in America. And the dirtbag was like, we're gonna back away slowly, you know? My partner loves Donna Haraway. We're cyborgs. We only exist in the world that we don't get to make or determine the conditions of the world that we're in. But whenever we can make decisions, we should try and be as ethical as possible about them. That's a really lazy, easy thing to do out of time. Thank you, everyone.
You've been listening to The Breakup Theory. As always, if you like the show, please rate and follow us wherever you get it, and tell your friends they need to break up.